Hi, I'm Andre Huey. Happy New Year and welcome to the SK Newsline, the year that was 2024. This is a program we have every year for the past few years, produced by SK Newsline, where we recap the year in news and current affairs in St. Kitts and Nevis, the wider Caribbean, and across the world. And I'm joined by two very astute panelists to help us to count down or actually look back at the year 2024. I'm speaking of Jamiella McPhail of Freedom FM and Mr. Glen Bart of our SK Newsline newsroom. Gentlemen and lady, Happy New Year and welcome.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right, Jamie, we'll start with you ladies first. Your top news stories for 2024.
Locally first, right?
Locally first, yes.
So I think the top news story for 2024, well, at least at the beginning of 2024 within St. Kitts and Nevis had to be crime. We saw some very gruesome murders. The murders seem to have a different feel last year, and many people were concerned about what was actually happening. Towards the ending of the year, we saw a break in that trend, thankfully.
For the past 4 months or so.
Yes. But before that, we did see a number of crimes happening.
Yeah, Mr. Bart, what was your top news story?
Well, I think, outside of the crime, really, the citizenship by investment program was another big issue. And it got even bigger with the RICO lawsuits being filed by Mr. Philip Martinez. And that created a whole new set of buzzing. But apart from that, there were also positive things happening within the CBI, but trying to get a balance somewhere to prevent it from collapsing completely. I think that was a big story.
Yeah. And I agree with both of you. I think those two stories were standout stories for 2024. Unfortunately, with the crime situation, as you said, Jamie, there were some really gruesome murders. We don't want to recap them or recount them. And certainly condolences to the family. One of the things that sort of stood out for me, in addition to those two things, towards the end of the year, bizarrely, was the increase in road fatalities.
Definitely.
Yeah, that was weird. It's something that we've never seen before in recent years, where we had 5, or I think it was 7 or 8 road fatalities in a week, which is very high for a small country like St. Kitts and Nevis. And again, it just underscores the importance of people being careful on the road. And now that we're getting good roads, it is very important that we have to be careful on the roads. And it also raises the question of public transportation too, because one of those accidents, the one in the New Guinea area, involved public transport. And it was reported that, and there were eyewitness reports that suggested that there was some form of speeding going on. So it really begs the question as to what the authorities are going to do to ensure that on the roads, that motorists and pedestrians, but more especially motorists, that they abide by the speed limits and the road code.
And you mentioned the fatalities, but what stands out to me is the number of accidents we see on a daily basis.
Yeah.
A lot of them, we don't see fatalities, but they are serious injuries. The motorbikes as well. We have had many persons losing limbs because of these serious vehicular accidents, and we really have to wonder what is going to happen, what measures could be put in place. I remember the Attorney General speaking about a road safety committee, about proper signage, and putting certain things in place so that we could see a decrease in some of these these vehicular accidents.
Let's go back to the issue of crime and talk more about it. We've seen the government launch the 90-day citizen security campaign, where various stakeholders were involved. I've been to a couple of them, representing the Media Association. And one of the things that stood out for me was, and actually someone actually mentioned it in one of the first sessions, that they hope that this is not another talk shop, that they hope that there will be tangible and active measures that come out of these consultations. They praise the government for having them, but they're saying that we've had these consultations, and they went far back as in the mid-1990s. A consultation similar to this happened in the 1990s. And again, we're here again, 30 years later, having the same discussion. Your thoughts on the 90-day campaign, Jamie, and whether you believe that this time around we're actually going to get some tangible solutions coming out of these sessions?
Well, I'm hopeful. I think that no one benefits from crime in St. Kitts and Nevis or anywhere for that matter. And I really think that the effort needed to be put in place. I think that I commend the government for putting that effort in place to have that consultation. And it was an ongoing consultative process. I commend them for doing that because the general population needed to see this is something that we're serious about. And I've said this many times before. We cannot sit back as a country and behave as though this is normal. From the time we start to behave as though this is normal, we've lost the battle. We need to send a strong message and let persons know this is not what we want for our country. We can't just say, you heard comments before saying, well, every country there's crime, but we are not in a position to make those kind of statements. So I really commend them for that. As I said, the statistics seem to be trending downward, and I'm happy for that because, again, St. Kitts is small. Majority of us, we know these people. Even if we don't know them personally, we know somebody who is connected to them, and it became a very traumatic situation.
Yeah. To add to that, I remember in one of the sessions, there was a discussion or a study. The results of the study, a summary of it was presented, which showed that St. Kitts and Nevis had, I believe, if my memory serves me correct, because I did that story, over 13 gangs, active gangs, or 15 gangs, I believe it was, involved St. Kitts and Nevis.
And that was just mind-blowing for me.
Right. And in fact, interesting enough, when we published the story, there were some people saying, well, the study was done between the summer of 2023 and the end of the year. There's a likelihood that those gangs probably would have increased in numbers over that period of time. But for a small country to have that many active gangs and the connections that they have with other gangs and, the gang feuds that,
I think that's the USAID study, correct?
Yes. Well, yes, USAID, yes, USAID.
Another thing that stood out for me in that study was the age range.
The age range, yeah.
They're
recruiting them from very young.
Exactly. So for me, that was scary because what are we doing to ensure that our children are safe? We send our children to school and they are being recruited by... It was just mind-blowing for me that you are telling me 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds, they already know who some of these gang members are. They have already spoken to them and they have already been approached in some cases. That was crazy.
And some of them are already involved. They're recruited and part of the gangs. It also begs the question, what systems are in place in the schools and also extracurricular activity to keep our young men and young women, because girls are also involved, from being recruited or being involved in gangs.
We saw a lot of conversation about the Farmer Peace Program, the Alternative Lifestyle Initiative. And, leading up to the 2022 election, that was a major talking point about the shortcomings of that program. For me, one of the major shortcomings was the fact that the program was not transparent. We didn't know what was happening with the program, right? But for me, looking at that data, one of the issues that stood out to me was the fact that we were dealing with people who were already associated with gangs, right? But there seemed to be a disconnect with the younger children. There seemed to be a disconnect in terms of preventing children from going into these gangs. So I think that is one of the issues that we can look at going forward. How do we prevent these very young children from wanting to emulate that lifestyle?
Yeah. Mr. Bart, what's sort of you in the 90-day campaign?
Well, perhaps one of the things that stood out in terms of being different from previous consultations on crime, dating back to the 1990s and even before, is that I think for the first time, that invitation to expand the discussion, inviting all political parties to get involved, has kind of worked to a major extent. Yes, there were some ruffles and that kind of thing, but generally overall, with all the political parties coming on board, sends a message. It's basically telling that everybody's against this kind of behavior. It also sets a tone for if there is a change of government, there is some kind of continuity in the process. Having to restart programs every time a government changes is a waste of time, a waste of money, a waste of efforts, and so forth. So we need to have a set of rules and conditions and programs that everybody can agree to. Well, this is the way we're going to proceed. This is the way we're going to go forward, so that there is continuity regardless of what is the situation. So that to me stood out as something that was different this time around in the general discussion.
Two things on the issue of crime before we wrap up, because we're coming close to a break. We did have some high-profile, lack of a better term, high-profile killings. We had the entertainer Imark, who was killed tragically in Molyneux, and then we also had a political activist who was also killed in Azua from the Central Bastion area. And so again, unfortunate. I mean, every killing is an unfortunate killing, but those two also stood out in terms of, because it happened at a time also when I think a lot of people were concerned, as you said, Jamie, about the number of killings that were taking place. And of course, those investigations continue. But kudos to the police. They have done some good work in terms of having persons charged. Towards the end of the year, we saw a number of people were arrested and charged for crimes. Now, of course, the process is not completed there because they still have to go to court and then have their matter heard in court. So then again, we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But at least the police have made a valiant effort in having persons arrested and charged, which we don't always see happen in St. Kitts and Nevis. So that's probably a good observation. Before we end this topic on crime and then we go for a break, for 2025, now, as you mentioned, Jamie, we've seen a decline in the homicides at least, and some of the serious crimes that were happening. What do you think needs to be done to sort of maintain this momentum going into the new year?
Well, I think we need to build on the 90-day campaign. We need to look at the gains from that campaign and really push them forward. I would like to see programs introduced within our schools, within our primary schools. A lot of times we look at the high schools and we think that is where the problem is. But if we are going to get to the root of the issue, I think we need to start with the little children so that they don't want to emulate this lifestyle. We are in a situation where we have many children who have lost parents because of this lifestyle. We are seeing these children grow up and become a part of the lifestyle, and this is what we want to change. So there needs to be some intervention there so that we could, see a brighter future for these children.
Mr. Bart?
Well, I think one of the things that has to happen is law enforcement needs to be a lot more successful in terms of the investigations, the arrest, and prosecution. Because if that is not effective, it sort of gives fuel for additional criminal, violent activity to continue, because they believe on the other end, if you are lucky to be alive, you're going to get away. So I want to see a lot more of law enforcement being successful, the investigation using all resources that they have at their disposal, and also the continued effort to integrate social contact in their program of prevention. Because everybody, churches or whatever, everybody needs to be on the same page with this thing. So I think that's the way we're going to have to move forward. A cohesive, coordinated approach to crime fighting.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll leave it right there on the issue of crime. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion on 2024, the year that was. We looked at crime. We're going to look at some other local stories before we move regional. I'm Andre Huey. We'll be right back.
Are you tired of Wi-Fi dead zones in your home? The Cable has the ultimate solution with our whole home Wi-Fi coverage. Say goodbye to frustrating signal drops and hello to seamless connectivity in every corner of your home. No more
Mom, my tablet's not working in my bedroom. My game is freezing, Daddy.
or WhatsApp calls dropping as you walk around the house. So many people struggle with dead zones and restricted Wi-Fi, and the Cable has the answer. Enjoy full blanket increased Wi-Fi coverage with installation in 48 hours or less. Whole home Wi-Fi coverage is here. Get the whole family connected today. Come in or call the Cable at 465-2588 to get your whole home Wi-Fi boost installed. The Cable, always giving you more. Terms and conditions apply.
The SKN Newsline website now offers you more news. Log on to www.sknnewsline.com for local, regional, and international news. You can also watch the latest newscast and keep abreast with news in sports, all from sknnewsline.com. That's www.sknnewsline.com. News at your fingertips.
I love the Cable because they're real. What you see is what you get. No hidden agenda, no tricks, just real, honest communication.
I'm Andre Huey, and welcome back to 2024, the year that was. We're recapping the year 2024. And our panelists, Jamiella McPhail from Freedom FM and Glen Bart from SKN Newsline. It's a SKN Newsline production. Before the break, we spoke about crime. That was one of the major topics for news in St. Kitts and Nevis, looking at the issues of the issue of crime and violence. We're now turning our attentions, and Mr. Bart mentioned this, the Citizenship and Investment Program was one of the topical issues, one of the topical stories for 2024. You also made reference, Mr. Bart, to the lawsuit from Philippe Martinez of MSR Media. That kind of started the year in a sense, because that story broke early in the year, and it sent everyone in a flurry. Everyone on all political sides, actually. People started talking about it. I actually read the lawsuit. It was very long, over 100 pages, and it had some really damning allegations in that lawsuit. How do you think that impacted the program itself? Now, eventually, the lawsuit has been withdrawn, but for most of the year, that was what most people seem to be talking about.
I think we need to step back a little further before the lawsuit, because things actually started to happen within the program fairly early in the year, January, February, thereabout. One has to remember that there had been a sort of threat by the European Union Commission and its agents to apply significant pressure on the citizenship by investment programs of the Caribbean, because they felt that not enough due diligence or proper due diligence was being done, and all kinds of nefarious personalities were getting into their country. And so that sort of hinged the activity of the government in terms of what they were planning to do in order to prevent the European Union from carrying through on the withdrawal of the Schengen visa-free access, which, if they had gone through with, would have killed the citizenship by investment program completely for the Caribbean. So it was a critical aspect of the CBI programs that the governments in the Eastern Caribbean would have had to deal with. It appears as if Dr. Terence Drew sort of led the charge in this regard. Because, remember, for us, the Citizenship by Investment Program, the inflows from it was in fact supporting our economy to a significant extent. So a sudden collapse would have created a crisis for this country. So at that point now, that is when the series of changes began to occur. We saw new legislation being passed, going into Parliament to tighten loopholes and all kind of things like that. We saw the discussion they had with the European Union in Dominica, with other CBI countries taking place, were able to sort of pacify the the European Commission to take some time and let us do some restructuring and that kind of thing. So at that point now, here comes the unusual, because a person who had been in the program, who had purchased the old Ocean Terracing, MSR Media Studios, now found himself, apparently from what he has said, in a situation that is connected to the underselling of citizenships applications through a jail project involving a Chinese agent. As a result, he believes that he could not sell his product at all on the market because of the underselling. Long and short of the issue is that he believed that there was a lot of corruption, and he filed a RICO lawsuit because he believed there was money laundering involved as well. And that started a tailspin of the program, of activities of concern, of attention, all the way down to almost the end of the year.
Yeah. What do you think, Jamie, we probably learned from the lawsuit? Because like I said, I've read it, and it has if those allegations are indeed true, then you're talking about corruption at the highest order taking place.
But we have heard about this.
We've heard
about
some
all
of it.
the majority of the allegations
Yes.
before.
But it wasn't this specific.
Exactly.
It was very, very specific.
Before the lawsuit was filed.
Yes.
And this really, these were accusations that were being spoken about in whispers. Because, you can't just put out these accusations to the public.
Yeah.
But this lawsuit really made them public. And I think as Mr. Bart said, it was strange. It was very unique because every political party was affected. There was at least one person connected to every political party that was affected.
Yeah.
So this was not a lawsuit that anybody wanted to be in the public domain, really and truly. It opened many eyes. Many people were, because for a long time the CBI program was something that was very abstract to a lot of people. Yeah, there's a program, that we get revenue from the program, but many people did not understand the ramifications of the program. Many people did not understand what exactly happened within this program.
And where the money goes.
Where the money goes, but we still don't know where the money goes to, right? But we have an idea, but we still don't really know. And I think with the lawsuit, that really, because you did some investigations as it relates to the CBI program. I have done many stories about the CBI program. We've heard many commentaries, especially by Dwyer Astafan, about this program. So we were really able to have that information in one place. For the first time, to me, in my mind, we saw an open discussion with ordinary citizens about the program. People were kind of polarized. There were some people who felt that Mr. Martinez was being disingenuous. There were some people who felt that Mr. Martinez was a hero for bringing the information to the public. What I would say is, going forward, we need more investigations.
And more checks and balances.
Exactly, because, and we still need to know. I don't know if that is something that the general public want to know, if they want the information, but I want it. I want to know exactly where the money went to.
It's very polarizing because, as you said, some people saw Philippe as a hero and some saw him as a scam artist because they went back to his criminal past.
And I think that was not by accident.
No.
Because here is this man. He's making all of these accusations.
Yeah.
And what do? You say, well, hello, you can't really make these accusations because you have been to prison for XYZ. So it was really to discredit him and the accusations that he was making. I think it's important to note that these accusations were not limited to Sankit and Nevis, but
extended to St. Lucia. St. Lucia
Yeah.
was part of the lawsuit as well. Mr. Bart, as we wrap up this part, you did a story about the lawsuit being dropped, emanating from, as Jamie was mentioning, in St. Lucia, because there was a party in St. Lucia who did something that caused this ripple effect, and eventually allowing Mr. Martinez, or forcing Mr. Martinez to withdraw the lawsuit. Just explain to our viewers what exactly.
Okay, what happens is that all of the defendants in the RICO lawsuit seem to have joined ranks, and it decided to take a common defense. And that common defense has to do with what is called diplomatic immunity. Now, apparently, it is a defense. You can use it, but apparently, what will happen now is that the process is going to be prolonged, and it's going to be expensive on the part of Mr. Martinez, because now it's a whole different ball game now. There are new rules with regards to diplomatic immunity and that kind of thing. So the threshold is going up, and it's going to cost him quite a bit of money. But it also is going to cost him time, because as he explains, there's a whole procedural process that could take up to 3 or 4 years before it even goes to court. So what he has done basically is to say, I have handed over all the evidence that he has collected. We don't know what it is, but he has handed all of that evidence over to the appropriate federal authorities in the United States. So it is up to them really to pursue the case if they so desire. But he can't pursue it because of the costs and time that's involved.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, as you said, Jamie, it all depends on whether people here would want to know what exactly happened, whether they're interested to find the truth. But, you know, the interesting thing about that whole situation for me was how everyone pulled ranks. So you had those who supported the government side, and so the government people who were accused were saying, this man's a scam, he's trying to destroy the CBI program. And then you had the opposition side who were also similarly saying the same thing, defending their person who was
So for the
accused.
first time you saw them saying the same thing.
Everybody, yes, exactly. So the opposition and the government were saying the same thing. You know,
That's what I'm saying. All this is a very strange kind of situation.
Exactly.
So, but again, it all depends on if people really want to know the truth. And I've said this before. I understand when people say that we need more investigative journalism in St. Nevis. But at the same time, when the information comes to the fore, what do you do with it? Are you going to accept it at face value and demand transparency and accountability? Or are you going to say, you accuse the journalists of being political?
You're
or
going to accuse the journalists of
Yeah,
being
that's
political.
This is
exactly.
this is a part of the
Right? And we know that.
Yeah.
We saw that with the Martinez situation now. Is Mr. Martinez perfect? No, but nobody is perfect, right?
But nobody has
And-
challenged the information. No one was
Exactly.
challenging the information. It was
Exactly.
always about the messenger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're not saying that
Exactly.
Mr. Martinez
And
had
then
good motives.
we
He may
saw
have other
the
motives.
premier of Nevis, Mark Brantley, being brought into the situation because everybody,
He was the one who
you
introduced
brought him to St. Nevis, right? And you didn't do the due diligence. So we saw him entering the conversation. Again, we need to have more conversations about the CBI program. Yes, the case has been withdrawn, but I don't think it should end there. I think this is something that needs to be pursued.
Well, we'll see what happens. It certainly, but again, just as we wrap up this point, the issue of the CBI program and its the financial viability of it, whether or not we're going to get to the high heights of the program when the program brought in a lot of money for the country. We saw a huge decline. The Prime Minister did say that that was expected because of the reforms they implemented, and they expect that things will get back to normal. But do you see that happen?
Well, I don't think that it's going to get back to the high levels, the peaks that it had, but it's going to bounce back a little bit. However, despite the fact that, according to the Prime Minister in his recent roundtable, that they need to have a discussion with regards to the numbers coming into the country, that has been expressed, yes, by some people. But I don't think that that, to me, that will have it will have a natural impact based on the various changes in the law and so forth that have occurred. I think it's going to go down. I think what we need to do now in order to really salvage some components out of this CBI program is now to go after the economic citizens that we already have and those who we believe can make a contribution in terms of investment in the country in various parts, in terms of sports or the creative economy or whatever else that we want to think about. We need to go after those persons and encourage them and facilitate their involvement in the country. I don't think we're going to have people bandit about, but I don't think we're going to have a situation where wholesale numbers of people, economic citizens, are going to be coming into the country. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, we'll end that discussion there on the CBI program. You're watching 2024, the year that was. We'll be right back after these messages. We'll talk a little bit more local, go regional, and we also have international coming up.
Are you tired of Wi-Fi dead zones in your home? The Cable has the ultimate solution with our whole home Wi-Fi coverage. Say goodbye to frustrating signal drops and hello to seamless connectivity in every corner of your home. No more
Mom, my tablet's not working in my bedroom. My game is freezing, Daddy.
or WhatsApp calls dropping as you walk around the house. So many people struggle with dead zones and restricted Wi-Fi, and the Cable has the answer. Enjoy full blanket increased Wi-Fi coverage with installation in 48 hours or less. Whole home Wi-Fi coverage is here. Get the whole family connected today. Come in or call the Cable at 465-2588 to get your whole home Wi-Fi boost installed. The Cable, always giving you more. Terms and conditions apply.
The SKN Newsline website now offers you more news. Log on to www.sknnewsline.com for local, regional, and international news. You can also watch the latest newscast and keep abreast with news in sports, all from sknnewsline.com. That's www.sknnewsline.com. News at your fingertips.
I love the Cable because they're real. What you see is what you get. No hidden agenda, no tricks, just real honest communication.
And we're back to 2024, the year that was, here on TVC Channel 40, an SK Newsline production. I'm your host, Andre Hugh. My panelists are Jamiella McPhail of Freedom FM and Glen Bart of SKN Newsline. Before the break, we spoke extensively about the CBI program, one of the big news topics of 2024. But before we move on from the local, we have to talk politics. You can't review news in St. Kitts and Nevis and not talk politics. So, even though it was not a political year, there were some interesting stories happening. One, of course, is the selection of, or the appointment of Natasha Gray Brooks as the leader of the People's Action Movement, one of the big political stories coming up. Your thoughts on that story, JB?
Well, I was happy to see a woman, because this is the first female in the history of St. Kitts leading a major political party in St. Kitts. The People's Action Movement has been around for a long time. Mrs. Gray Brooks, she contested the election for the first time in the 2022 general elections, and I think she put on a valiant effort. She was not successful in that bid, but she has been in the political arena for some time. She has worked as a party organizer. She has done a lot in terms of really the fundraising for the party, organizing the constituency. So she is no stranger to the People's Action Movement. I would like to see more females taking higher roles within political parties in St. Kitts. We saw that towards the last election. We saw more female candidates than ever before. So now we are seeing that they're not just becoming candidates, they're not just working behind the scenes to make the men more successful, but they're actually leading parties. So I'm very happy about that, and I look forward to her contribution on a national level.
Right. And that, of course, kind of takes us to the point, Mr. Bart, because On Nevis, Nevis already led the way in that with Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge leading the Nevis Reformation Party. And then we see a situation on Nevis. I want us to talk about that because I thought this is also a story that made its rounds in the political realm. And the fact that Nevis still doesn't have an opposition leader in the Nevis parliament.
Well, in a sense, it is an unfortunate situation. We had two female candidates within the Nevis Reformation Party winning their seats, being thrust into the parliament of the Nevis Island Assembly. Unfortunately, there was some sort of disagreement in the procedural matters in terms of appointments of persons, of senators, and that kind of thing. Accusations began to fly, and the next thing you know, after a long while, one of the candidates, Simmons, Mrs. Simmons, was put out of the party. And that basically led the foundation then for even less cooperation among the two women. And it's a really unfortunate situation because here was an opportunity for them to shine and to push the interests of women in politics even further. And this kind of thing has happened.
Yeah.
So right now, there isn't a strong opposition presence, at least not as strong as it should be or could be in the Nevis Island Assembly, because of a split point of view taking place.
Well, that takes me to the point of opposition in general, because we're now talking at the federal level, and the vision politician is the opposition leader, in this case, the Premier of Nevis, Mark Brantley. No stranger to the position. He held this position before in a previous dispensation. But now there have been some talk in the public, and this is a question I asked him, about whether he feels he is, that some people feel he's not being aggressive enough as an opposition leader, and that some national issues that needed to be ventilated are not being aggressively pursued because his approach as the opposition leader is different. In his response, he basically said that the opposition doesn't always have to be cantankerous and aggressive. It can be a case of constructive approach to bring about constructive opposition. But some people still are not pleased with that. They feel that the opposition leader should be a little bit more diligent and more aggressive. Your thoughts, Jamie, because you've covered some parliament and you've some stories from parliament, and there's some issues that some people feel are not being ventilated properly.
I have heard the comments about the Honorable Mark Brantley and his role as the leader of the opposition. What I would say towards that is the fact that, the opposition within Parliament has a duty to the people. The duty is to be the watchdog, to provide information that the government is not necessarily willing or keen to present within their presentations. Now, we have not seen the robust debates that we have become accustomed. Now, Mr. Brantley is clear that he feels that his approach is more constructive and it's the approach to get things done. Because with collaborating with the government, he feels that's a way to push the people's agenda forward. There are those who are of the view that while that may be so, there is information within some of these bills that are being debated that is not being properly ventilated. One of those bills was the judge-only trial. We heard from a prominent criminal attorney who said, but this is something that these are some issues that should have come out within that debate. But we did not hear that debate, right? Because of, and Mr. Brantley is a lawyer.
I was just going to say that.
Right? But he's not a criminal defense lawyer, but he is a lawyer. So because of his approach, his more quiet, more demure approach, the general public was kind of left wanting in some of the information. That is the opinion of some people.
There's the other argument, though, Jamie, that because of Mr. Brantley's position as premier, he has to ensure that also that he's on good terms with the federal government to ensure that assistance that the Nevis government may need from the federal government, they may be able to get it. We've seen in the past what has happened in the past when his predecessor, the late Vance Amory, was Premier of Nevis. They had an adversarial relationship with the then federal government led by Prime Minister Dr. Denzel Douglas. So you probably feel then that maybe Mr. Brandy has that in mind and believes that a more amicable approach to the opposition is better for Nevis.
But we're speaking about the leader of the opposition. But he's not alone within Parliament on the opposition benches.
Right.
Right? I feel that the opposition has not been as robust as previous years. And I'm not just speaking about Mr. Brantley, but I'm speaking about even the leader, the former leader of the People's Action Movement, Dr. Sean K. Richards, and Dr. Harris. There are times where they're not even in Parliament, right? And I think this is necessary to present some of this information to the people. Now, they may have their reasons. Maybe they feel that it is important for, the processes to happen. But I think the general consensus is that the opposition has not been robust enough.
No. Let's move on from this quick.
Just a quick thing, though. At the same time, okay, I understand the concern that the opposition may not be robust enough. On the other hand, though, we get a situation where the contribution that is made through certain changes in the bills to make them more effective, from the opposition standpoint, has been taken on board by government simply because of a more collaborative approach in Parliament. But yes, I agree there are a number of issues that I think this year the leader of the opposition is going to have to really take notice of things that people are concerned about, and he has to do perhaps more research to ensure that those things are come to the fore within Parliament.
Right.
So he has a responsibility.
Quickly, before we end this segment, we have to talk about the performance of the government. They've been now 2.5 years, we're in 3 years. Your thoughts on the performance of the Prime Minister, Dr. Terence Drew, as the first-time parliamentarian and first time as Prime Minister. 2.5 years, there have been plaudits, there have been criticisms. But generally over the past year, in terms of the initiatives and the work that he's been doing through his government, how would you say that he has performed?
Here's the thing. When you're out in the public realm, you're going to get a lot of different perspectives. And you're going to get people who are in favor and people who are genuinely feel that they have been cheated out of a number of things. So one has to look and say, well, what is it exactly that the current Labour administration has done? And they have done quite a lot. The problem, it seems to be that there were a number of promises made during the campaign. And delivering on some of those promises actually takes time because foundational work has to be done. For example, let's take the Bastard High School as a key point, or the hospital that Dr. Drew has been talking about for the longest while. Those things can't happen overnight. There's engineering stuff to be done, geological work has to be done before you can even start construction. And so there was a point of view from the people that as soon as the Labour Party got into office, that there were a number of things that were ready to be rolled out, and they were not. And things began to go sour. Add to that has been the traditional double salary issue that has come to the fore. And I could understand, too, why the change has to be made, because the economy is not in support of that kind of thing at this point in time. So maybe Dr. Drew is making the right decisions, but he's not going to get much support in the public realm.
For the hard decisions.
But it's a hard decision to make. But he has to make them. He's in a peculiar situation right now. He's in no man's land as far as we're concerned. Right? But I think this year, hopefully, we'll begin to see a bit of clarity in terms of the political outcomes and the economic outcomes and so forth. So, but hopefully by the end of the year, the population will be a little bit clearer as to the performance of the Labour Party so far and the performance of the Prime Minister.
To piggyback off of what Mr. Bart said, a lot of what Mr. Bart said, I think a lot of it is a messaging issue. Because as Mr. Bart spoke about the double salary issue and whether or not the economy can handle the double salary. But we're hearing the economy is doing well, right? So I think, and I'm not trying to be facetious in any way, but we need a clear message. And this is something that we see it with politicians throughout the world. You tell us one thing on one hand, and on the other hand,
you see something else.
Exactly, you're seeing something else. So I think once they get that messaging problem fixed, that the government will become more popular. Because we saw just after the 2022 elections, because this past year was basically their second year,
Yes.
we saw that people were hopeful, people were excited about this administration.
expectancy.
Yes. So I think once they get that messaging issue worked out, people will regain that excitement.
Right. Well, we're going to leave it right there. When we come back, we are going to discuss regional news, and that will be our final segment, regional and international. That will be our final segment of the show. You're watching 2024, the year that was. We'll be right back.
Are you tired of Wi-Fi dead zones in your home? The Cable has the ultimate solution with our whole home Wi-Fi coverage. Say goodbye to frustrating signal drops and hello to seamless connectivity in every corner of your home. No more
Mom, my tablet's not working in my bedroom. My game is freezing, Daddy.
or WhatsApp calls dropping as you walk around the house. So many people struggle with dead zones and restricted Wi-Fi, and the Cable has the answer. Enjoy full blanket increased Wi-Fi coverage with installation in 48 hours or less. Whole home Wi-Fi coverage is here. Get the whole family connected today. Come in or call the Cable at 465-2588 to get your whole home Wi-Fi boost installed. The Cable, always giving you more. Terms and conditions apply.
The SKN Newsline website now offers you more news. Log on to www.sknnewsline.com for local, regional, and international news. You can also watch the latest newscast and keep abreast with news in sports, all from sknnewsline.com. That's www.sknnewsline.com. News at your fingertips.
I love the Cable because they're real. What you see is what you get. No hidden agenda, no tricks, just real, honest communication.
And we're back with the final segment of the program 2024, the year that was. I'm your host, Andre Huey. We're recapping the year 2024. We looked mostly at local news the first few minutes of the show. We're now focusing our attention on regional and international news. The top international or top regional story for me has to be Haiti. It has been for the past 3-4 years because of what's been happening there. This past year has gone even worse. The latest report from the United Nations suggests that over 5,600 people were killed through gang violence, many more injured, 1,000 more injured, and also kidnapped. The situation in Haiti is just deteriorating by the year. Every year we talk about Haiti, it gets worse. And we're trying to figure out what's going to be the solution. Of course, we had the UN mission going in this year. There seems to be, though, a hands-off approach from America and the United Nations. The support that they're offering hasn't been as much as in previous years. And I think it has a lot to do with what happened in 2010 when the UN mission went into Haiti and there were a lot of abuses of citizens by UN soldiers. And so the UN kind of they've lost the trust of the people, and they kind of don't really want to get as involved. America, on the other hand, I'm not sure what their motives are. They are funding the mission, but in terms of sending troops, that's totally out of the question for them. We have troops out of Kenya, out of Jamaica. I see some Central American troops just recently went there, but it doesn't seem to be making a dent. The gangs seem to be just taking full control of the country.
To me, okay, first of all, the involvement of the United States, I could understand why they don't want to go into Haiti right now, simply because of history. Historically, the United States has been involved with Haiti at multiple levels, politically, economically, and so forth. And they created a whole situation that eventually has boiled down to what it is now. So they have to take some responsibility for what is happening. However, things are so dire at the moment that I think it's going to take military action to go in there and clean out the place, so to speak, and reset the political agenda. Because as it is now, the current forces that are on the ground, they're really way too small in numbers, and I don't think they're going to make much of a dent. So that is why you are seeing the continued degeneration of the environment on the ground.
And you talk about politics, it hasn't really helped that the current or the prime minister that was appointed was forced to resign just mere months into his term.
Yeah.
New prime minister coming in. It's not changing much in that sense. So.
It's hard for any kind of political stability to occur in Haiti right now. It's difficult for any political arrangement to work because the environment does not facilitate political policy or any kind of thing. It's not going to happen.
Another major story that occurred in the regional scene was murder. I was going to say assassination, but clearly it was the homicide of the Member of Parliament in Antigua and Barbuda, Hassan Michael. That happened late in the year. It was a shock to many people when we heard it, including myself, that something like this has happened. It's never happened in the history of Antiguan politics, and we could go as far as to say maybe even the Eastern Caribbean, that a sitting Member of Parliament was murdered in that gruesome manner.
I remember speaking to you that morning, and you said, JB, is this confirmed?
Yeah.
It was shocking. That was the major news story for that week because, as you mentioned, we had not seen that in the Caribbean before, right? And there was a lot of speculations about why. You know, that early during that morning, that's why people were concerned is this politically motivated? Was it a robbery? There were many speculations out there in the public domain. What I can say, I would commend the Antiguan police force for really investigating the matter swiftly, and someone has been charged.
Yeah, actually confessed to the crime, I believe. I think one of the reports we read that he confessed to the killing. And again, our family goes out to Mr. Michael's family and the entire St. Peter constituency, which, by the way, are having their by-election as well. So we will see a new MP elected there. Guyana is on the radar once again. Guyana has become the attraction of a lot of countries internationally because of its oil wealth. But they still have this border dispute issue with Venezuela, which didn't really go away in 2024. In fact, it was kind of heightened in 2024 because we saw what happened with the referendum that happened a few months prior to that.
It's not going to go away. The border issue with Guyana has been happening it's a decades old, if not centuries old dispute.
It's centuries old, actually.
Centuries?
Yeah, it's not going to go away. I think what happened with that referendum, though, was the fact that Maduro was losing support in Venezuela. Now, this is a situation, this issue is very close to the hearts of many Venezuelans because they really feel that the land belongs to Venezuela. So it was a way for him to kind of drum up the support that he needed going into the election. The funny thing about that is that most of the people just did not turn up to vote, right? And it really shows that he does not have the support on the ground. in Venezuela, even though he later went on to win the election.
Yeah. And of course, America and the rest of the world still hasn't recognized the results of that election. So we will going to see, and especially now with the Donald Trump, and we're going to talk about Trump in a bit, coming in as president, we're going to see a tightening of the screws on Venezuela when it comes to the sanctions. And then when that happens, there's another exodus of Venezuelans leaving. Mostly they're going to end up in Trinidad and Guyana, the same Guyana that they've been fighting for the land. And it's a messy situation.
It's messy, but it is a dangerous situation for the Caribbean as well, because we're right here, right? It's in what we have long called a zone of peace. So this is something that we're going to have to look at in 2025. We're going to continue to monitor. I know that the Prime Minister of St. Vincent, he was really instrumental in getting the parties together to speak and to come up with the Argyle agreement. So this is something that we're just going to have to monitor, but I don't see, especially with oil being involved in the conversation, I don't see the issue going away.
Quickly on the Caribbean, and then we'll go international. Cuba. We see again a lot of calls coming from Caribbean countries and the world for Cuba, for the sanctions to be lifted off Cuba. We saw last year they had a lot of power issues, their power grid falling apart. There were water issues, there were food shortages, as seems to be the constant refrain for Cuba. What is the future for Cuba for 2025? And of course, with the Donald Trump presidency, tightening of the screws again on the sanctions. It's not going to go away and get any easier for Cuba.
No, I don't think so.
It's going to get worse?
I think it's going to get worse. At the heart of this dispute is United States feels as if certain properties, businesses that were in Cuba at the time of the revolution belonged to them and they were not compensated. And on top of that comes the Soviet Union influence on Cuba and the Cold War and all of that kind of stuff. So it is a long, complicated history that is not going to change anytime soon. I know President Obama tried to make some progress there and ease the restrictions and so forth. But I think generally, the United States is not going to ease up on Cuba.
And the irony of that, as you mentioned, Obama, is that Biden, who was the vice president at the time when Obama was in power, was in for a whole term and
didn't do anything about it.
Anything for Cuba. Actually made it worse. Which is kind of ironic. So with a Trump presidency, we expect that's going to continue.
It's going to tighten.
And I think that's the perfect segue into international to talk about Donald Trump's presidency, the fact that he's been reelected. What surprised me, I'm not totally surprised he won, because I felt that there were, permutations of that leading up to the elections. Even though, with all the changes that happened, I thought, Kamala would have put up an even tougher fight. But I was surprised that he won the popular vote this time around. The last time he did, this time he won the popular vote. It's clearly a shift against the Democratic Party in the U.S.
Yeah.
I think race and gender had a serious role to play in that election as well. I remember saying to somebody, I don't think that Americans have the appetite to vote for a woman, and a black woman at that. I didn't see it happening. The thing about Donald Trump is I often say he says the quiet part out loud. Donald Trump speaks for a lot of Americans. And that is what we have to come to the realization that this is the mindset of a lot of Americans. To add insult to injury, we saw an Obama become president. They don't want another black person in the Oval Office.
Aside from that, Jamie, and I agree with you that those factors played a role. I thought the Democratic Party made a lot of missteps.
Yes, that is true.
Well, the situation with Biden, getting him out midway in the race,
and it was too late.
It was too late. They didn't have a primary, so they didn't have a chance. Because I don't think a lot of Democrats really wanted Kamala to run, but she was the obvious choice because she's the vice president. So obviously, she would have been the one in line.
And even some of the people who got behind her in the end, remember when there were calls for Biden to step down? These were the same people telling the American people she's not ready. Right? So if she wasn't ready a few months ago,
Oh, she's
Why
right, yeah.
should we vote for? And again, it comes down to a messaging issue.
Yeah.
Another messaging issue with the Democrats' race was the use of celebrities. Generally speaking, poor people don't want rich people to come tell them who to vote for. Simple.
But the Republicans
It's as
use Elon
simple
Musk.
as that.
The Republicans use
Right?
Elon Musk.
But Elon Musk is not seen as a celebrity, like a Hollywood
Well, he's a rich man.
superstar, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, he's a rich
He's
man.
seen as a rich man
An
who
immigrant
built
way.
his
Yeah.
way up.
Yeah.
And there are lots of issues with Elon Musk as well. But that was a major issue within the race.
I
You're
think that
bringing
was
these
designed to-
celebrities to endorse
That was
her.
designed to
And
get the Gen Zs out to vote. The Gen Zs are.
it didn't work.
Yeah,
It didn't work.
No, the Democrats have a messaging issue. One of the things, and I brought this point up with Peter Wickham when I interviewed him the day after the election, and I asked him about the fact that the Democratic Party is seen as a party of elites. Is now seen what the Republican Party was always seen as. Seen as a party of elites. They look down on Donald Trump supporters. They call them uneducated. They say that they're dumb,
Ignorant.
they're ignorant. And so, you know, there's this sense that, okay, I'm not educated. I don't have a college degree. I'm not as bright as some of these people are. So I don't really have a place in the Democratic Party.
exactly.
And I
And
think
so
that's the
you're not
messaging they'll have to-
endearing these people to vote for you.
Yeah. Mr. Bart, in terms of a Donald Trump presidency, he will become president of the United States with all the legal issues that he has as well. How do you see the Caribbean and the rest of the world playing into another 4 years of Donald Trump?
It's going to be an interesting 4 years.
It has already started.
Very interesting. Generally, I would say the Republican Party, when in power, has had a more assertive approach to international affairs. So he knew where the United States stood on various issues. With the coming of the Democrats, there are a lot of gray areas going on right now, and that in itself creates a new set of problems. Now, with Donald Trump being at the helm, his style of governance is so unpredictable that it is very hard to say what is going to happen down the road. But we have seen some hints of what it could mean for the Caribbean. Issues of immigration, for example, would come front and center for many Caribbean nations if the deportation of persons from the United States into the Caribbean becomes a quick issue and a big issue. And then you also have general policy in relation to development issues and support of various things like climate change and all of those kind of things that are important to the Caribbean may not necessarily be important to the Donald Trump administration. And so we're going to see a sort of mixed bag of policies in support of Caribbean and against the Caribbean all at the same time. And so it is our leaders who, I think, it will be up to our leaders really to push the agenda in terms of the relationship between the United States and the Caribbean. And don't leave it to the United States to set the agenda. And we have to set the agenda.
Right. And last but certainly not least, the Middle East crisis. That's a never-ending conflict. We saw escalation of violence in the Middle East, particularly between Israel and other Arab nations. Is there any sign of hope that maybe with the Donald Trump presidency, we've already heard him making some strong remarks on the issue in the Middle East and wanting to see the conflict coming to an end? Jamie?
No, I'm not hopeful. Donald Trump this past week said that if Hamas does not release the hostages, all hell will break loose. He was pressed on that and he said, well, you know what all hell break loose means, right? I find Donald Trump to be somebody who thrives on conflict, right? So I don't see any resolution to the issue between Hamas and between the Palestine and Israel at all. I wish I could be more hopeful, but I am still awaiting the rest of the world to actually come out and say what we've seen some persons in the Caribbean do it. We've seen Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, really denounce what's happening in the Gaza Strip. But I feel like the world has just sat by and allowed what is happening to happen, and it's going to get worse. Because if he is saying that we're going to see all hell break loose when the images look like hell already, there's only worse to get.
While that is true, also, one has to consider the original context in which this conflict started. Hamas really is to blame for what is happening. And people seem to forget that, or conveniently don't want to remember. But Hamas is the cause of this conflict. And any nation, whether it is Israel, St. Kitts, Grenada, St. Lucia, Jamaica, has the right to defend its citizens from an aggressor. And that is what Israel started doing. I don't want to go too much in the details, but the United States will back Israel for various reasons. And also, don't forget that wars in general, whether it's in Ukraine as the case may be, or anywhere in the world, is a benefit for the United States system, because a lot of the infrastructure, military infrastructure, thrives on conflict. Conflict supports that system and the economy of the United States. So you're not going to see major changes on that front anytime soon.
Well, we'll leave it there. Gentlemen and lady, thank you so much for taking the time out to be on this panel. It's always a pleasure to have this year-end panel to sort of recap the previous year and look ahead for 2025. And thank you, the viewers, for watching 2024, the year that was here on TVC Channel 40. Again, you can watch this on our rebroadcast times or visit our social media pages, Facebook and YouTube, on TVC as well as SK Newsline. From all of us here at TVC Channel 40, we want to wish you a happy 2025 and thank you for your support in 2024. We look forward to your continued support in 2025. I'm Andre Huey. I was your host.